Welcome everyone to Coaching Conversations with the Executive Coaches of Orange County, ECofOC. My name is Ernest Stambouli. I am the chair at ECofOC. Coaching Conversations is a direct response to pressing issues and questions we hear from our clients. And ECofOC is a nonprofit organization that offers no-cost leadership and management development to nonprofits in Orange County. And our mission is to help nonprofits fulfill more of their mission. Today at ECofOC, we understand that people in leadership positions are facing unprecedented challenges. And at ECofOC, our 60+ coaches are committed to listen and offer their best coaching in helping you, the leaders of nonprofits, take purposeful action in these challenging times. Our speaker today is Tara Norton, Executive Coach at ECofOC and at Accelerated Performance Solutions. Now, Tara will take us into the future, not as a simple manifestation of the past, but as a full thrust into this huge global historic change that we are all living. And she's really good at it. Tara's message with the 5 levels of inspirational leadership is an important one. Leaders must pivot and bounce to share a future where 10 years from now, you will be remembered as an impactful leader, family member, and an influential community member. Tara is an executive leadership coach, and she will share the themes and leadership strategies that her clients are working to implement throughout the last 7 weeks to model inspirational leadership. So here is how to participate in this interactive webinar. First, all webinar attendees are going to be in view and listen only mode. So for the interactive part of the webinar, there will be polling questions that you will see on your screen at some point during the talk. Also, there will be questions that will be posted through the chat box in Zoom. Please take a moment to locate your chat box. There's already something posted in there. And when you see these questions, you are encouraged to share examples of how you or people you know are inspiring leadership in these challenging times. Now, finally, please take a moment to locate and open the Q&A window in Zoom. And during Tara's talk, at any time, please type in your questions in there. And when you click send, you can choose to send anonymously if you do not want your name attached to the question. And when Tara is complete with her talk, I will go over the questions, I will read them to everyone, and we will work on answering as many as we have time for. With that, Tara, thank you for doing this. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ernest, for the wonderful overview and kind introduction. You know, I'm really excited to be here today and just share a couple of stories and examples of how I'm watching my leaders during this historical time pivot and bounce. And in different ways, it's around how they're showing up, how they're helping their direct reports, how they're working with their team, how they're looking horizontally and helping their peers and cross-functional teams, and also how they're managing up. Since what I'm calling Freaky Friday of March 13th, the conversations with my clients have completely changed and pivoted. So what today is going to be is a really exploration of what have those conversations been, what are those examples of inspirational leadership, and even common sense that, as we all know, common sense is not always common practice. But I'm excited to share, but even more, I would love for all of you to share your best practices. And this is brand new for Ernest and I, so be easy on us, the chat box idea. But what is important is that we have amazing clients on the call today. We also have wonderful executive coaches of Orange County who are helping and supporting and asking really important questions to help them through this process. So whatever you're doing or what you're seeing in others, please add it to the chat box as we go through today's presentation. So with that, let's talk about the end in mind, quoting one of my favorite, Stephen Covey. Our conversation is going to start off with kind of a little perspective of where we are and also where you are personally through this change process that we're going through. The 5 levels of inspirational leadership, the themes and strategies, also a little bit on proactive business planning in a very reactive world right now. And what can you do moving forward to inspire leadership and create your own legacy? So I know this PowerPoint slide is probably a big no-no, and I can't read it, so you probably can't read it either. But the point of it is that in the beginning, since March 13th, freaky COVID Friday, there was a lot of statements out there around, oh, we're all in the same boat, the world is all together. And that might be true on the surface, but underneath, we all know that our journeys are different. The realities that we're going through, the work we all are having or not having, the way that we go to the grocery store, if we have enough toilet paper. There's so many different perspectives and realities that people are showing up in, and it's a lot. So from that, I want to layer on something else. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the grief cycle, but it's interesting. I saw in Psychology Today an article a couple days ago, and I wanted to layer this in because I think it's an important point of perspective. And just for fun, Ernest and I are going to try to do a poll with you. And Ernest, if you could go ahead and send that out to the group. But just right now, today, in this moment, where are you in this process? And how are you doing? And as you think about that, I'm going to read what Psychology Today, what it might sound like to be in denial. So for example, might sound like, this whole thing is so overblown. What a media circus. Anger might sound like, forget what they told us. I'm bored and I'm having some friends over. Bargaining might sound like, this will be over by Easter. I'll be safe until then, and then we could go back to normal. Depression might sound like, I am high risk and likely to die alone. No one will come to help me when the time comes. Acceptance might sound like, the world is going to change, but maybe when all of this is over, we will be kinder to one another. So with that, layering on this idea of, all of our journeys are different, all of our emotions are different. And if you follow neuroscience, a little bit of David Rock's work, what are our brains doing right now? Well, our brains are hardwired to safety, and they're on overdrive. And so they're latching on to, what am I going to do about my job? What am I going to do about my kids? What am I going to do about homeschooling? All the words and the stories, right? And so your brain is on overdrive, and it's thinking of all of these solutions to every single information point that's coming at us daily. And so our emotions are going a little nuts, our brains are going a little crazy, and our own journeys are a little different. So with all of that, just kind of getting centered, thinking about how we all show up during this time is going to be important, and what we inspire in ourselves and also with others is going to be really key. Because when we come back to this 10 years from now, how will you be remembered? So looking at the poll, Ernest, would you mind maybe bringing that up so we can see what the results might be? I think you're on mute.
Double mute there. Thank you. So I'm not sure if everyone sees the polls, but I'll read them and then I'll see if I can display that to everyone. Of the five, the first one is denial. We got 0%. The second one is anger. We got 0%. The third is bargaining. We got 14%. Depression, 11%. And finally, acceptance, 75%.
Wow, that's really great. I'm glad to see that we're all kind of shifting towards the better part. Thank you for sharing that. Hopefully everybody can see that as well. So thank you for participating in that. We're going to move on. I can get my slide. There we go. So let's talk a little bit about the 5 levels of inspirational leadership. And through my conversations, it seems like there's different things happening at different levels. And I wanted to put together these 5 different levels and just share with you what not everybody's doing, but some people are doing more than others, but there's some really great goodness and nuggets of silver lining that's coming through. And so take a moment, if you haven't already, as Ernest mentioned, look at your chat box and you will have directions in there. And as we go through each of these levels, please share, what are you doing that might be big or small in the way that you're inspiring yourself, in the way that you're seeing and working with your direct reports, with a team, cross-functional teams, and also managing up. For your entry, please just put number 1 and then you, ... and then your example, so that at the end of this, we can all copy and paste the list and be able to have that as a takeaway. You can copy and paste your list into a Word document or into an email so that you can have it. So it's trial and error here, so I hope it works. So let's go ahead and continue. So level 1, let's talk about you and all of us personally. I'm sure you've been getting a lot of webinars coming at you about how are you taking care of yourself, and build airplane analogy of you need to put a mask on yourself and breathe before you can help others. And this is really true. We talked a little bit before about all these things that we're all going through personally. What are you doing around your home life, your work, your community? And when I first started talking with my clients, we didn't want to talk about any kind of development goal. We were just talking about life and what happened yesterday and today and what their challenges are in the moment. And as any good coach knows, you need to really follow your client and be where they are. And so the conversations was all about them and what was showing up for them. I have a wonderful story that I'd like to share about a dentist, one of my clients. And she has a husband, he's a first responder, and he's not home as much as they would love to have him home. But she has a son, and she went to the University of Texas, and she pulled open the commencement speech. Maybe some of you are familiar with it, from 2014 with Admiral McRaven. And it all centered around this very inspirational talk about, if you want to change the world, or if you just want to do one thing in a positive direction, make your bed. That's the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning, is just make your bed. And so if you haven't seen that clip before, please, I encourage you to see it. But what she did, she watched it with her son, and her son actually thought, hey, this is a great idea. Why don't we make our bed and just start from there and try to normalize all of this and any of this? And she agreed, and they weren't really good bed makers to begin with, and now they're getting pretty good. And it's wonderful to watch, because now they have something to talk about, to bond over, a memory from this time. Then in 10 years from now, they can say, hey, you know, my mom and I, we were going through this thing, and it was amazing because we just tried to do one thing that normalized all this, and it was positive. And so I was really inspired by that story, and I started doing that with my 9-year-old, and he's a better bed maker than I am. So we're doing that together. So that inspiration really led to one other inspiration in me. So another example is, I have a VP, and she unfortunately got furloughed. And during this time, she goes, you know, I just got to do something bigger and better. I've always wanted to do something, but I just don't know what it is. So she really started to find some soul searching, and she created, I want to be on a board of a nonprofit, and she tried to figure out which one she wanted to do. So she found that out, and she actually is in conversations now, and probably next year she will be on that board. So these are small things that are common sense sometimes, but we don't have the space or the capacity to do personally. So I'm going to pause there and just hopefully take a moment, think about what are you doing with your family? What different things and opportunities are you now having that you want to carry through to the newer normal, if you will, and beyond? Think about your clients, think of others that are doing some things, and enter them into the chat. All right, while you're doing that, let's move on to level 2. Oops, sorry, before that, this is also some things that I'm working with a couple of clients on, and it's really putting into action some goals. Because when this all started to happen, people were just like spinning. And this was an opportunity, especially for my planners out there, the people that really like to have clear, concise things to do and have a checklist and get that happy endorphin. But they were writing out intentions during this time. And as you know, anytime that you write down a goal, it increases your odds 42% of that goal happening. Also, research tells us from the Association of Talent Development that if you share it with someone, it increases your probability to 65%. And if you are part of accountability groups, those are becoming more popular these days, and what I call make it stick group and plan, is it increases your odds of 95% of that goal happening. So again, some people will gravitate to this and some people will keep those goals top of mind. But again, this is another best practice that I'm seeing. All right, level 2, direct reports. So what will you do with your direct reports during this time? And I'm not going to go through each of these, but what I will highlight is that the emotional support that we have an opportunity with right now around empathy, empathic listening skills, grace, gratitude, those are all really important right now. And asking how our employees are doing. What can I do to help support you best during this time? And really being authentic and having those deeper conversations. I will tell you, people are not going to remember what you said as a manager. They're going to remember how you made them feel. And that is going to be very effective long-term for your relationships, for yourself, loyalty, engagement, and just building trust. The other thing that I'm seeing is around a story that I have, a HRVP that I'm working with, and she is very directive. She's a very high achiever. You might know one, and raise your hand if you are one. And she uses communication and her leadership style that's very direct. And sometimes that's great, but sometimes it needs to be what I call soften the edges of that tone or kind of direct language with certain people. And so when we are all under stress, and this is a common knowledge and research point, is that when we're under stress, our strengths become stronger and we go to our natural self. And so her natural leadership style is very directive. And so she knows that about herself. And so she's trying to be patient and kinder and just breathing more before she steps out and works with each of her direct reports, because all of them are different in the way that they're showing up and their needs and their support and how they process information. So that's another way that I'm seeing the inspirational leadership, by starting with ourselves and knowing our own stressors and how we respond and how we show up with our team. All right, for this chat, please enter in maybe some ideas around direct reports, what you're doing, what you're seeing into the chat. And next, we're going to talk about level 3. which is team. What are we doing around our team? So what connections and support can you give from that perspective? What team goals and meetings can we have through this time? Working looks really different now, and working remote is new for a lot of people. So what could be best practices? And I have a couple of leaders that are saying to their team, look, here's 3 articles on working remote best practices. Read them, bring to the next meeting what you would like to present to the group and think that we might want to do together as a team. And so the leaders giving them choices on how they show up during this time and how often they want to meet and so on and so forth. An example that I'll give from another client, he's a senior vice president of sales. And he has an extroverted team, and they can't see their customers right now. And so what do you do when you're in sales? You can't go out and meet with your clients. But what he's doing is he's doing a lot of education and training. But when he comes together each week with his team, he brings in a song or a movie clip, and he says, okay, I want whoever guesses what the song or the movie clip is first and connects it to what we're going to talk about today on our agenda, gets a $10 Venmo at the end of the meeting. And so it's a little corny and it's a little fun, but I bet you 5 years from now, people are going to remember, I had this leader that, wow, it was bumpy times, but he was so memorable in the way that he uplifted us, he made us laugh, we had a good time, and I got to be competitive when I couldn't even go out and compete. So that's an example of that we're seeing. Another one is I have a introvert leader who is working on increasing his executive presence and assertiveness in crucial conversations. And he has a team that in the past, they're working kind of siloed, and they really didn't meet as a team weekly or bi-weekly or anything. And there's been some kind of confusion and conflict that's been going on with the team. And he got out of his comfort zone and he said, I really don't like Zoom, but I'm going to bring my team together because I know I have some introverts and extroverts on my team, and so I'm going to really just try to see what they want to do. So again, he brought the idea to the team, and a couple of weeks have passed, and the team is breaking down barriers. People that weren't talking to each other before are now reaching out to each other. And so it's creating this synergy and collaboration that's really wonderful to watch. So that's another example. So I'm going to pause there. Again, if you have any ideas around team, put it into the chat box. Moving on to cross-functional collaboration. So we've talked about ourselves, we've talked about direct reports, our teams. Now let's look this way. And I have an example of a scientist client that I'm currently working with, and his team was furloughed during this time. And his manager, who was brand new, about 2-3 months, he was furloughed. And so he's like, what am I going to do? He was actually wanting for the longest time to be able to work with his peers. He has 2 other scientists, and they all had their direct reports furloughed during this time. And so he reached out to them and said, hey, I know we have maybe some time, and there's some projects that would be great for us to work on and bring whenever the time is right in front of our leadership team. But what do you think? Should we start this synergy? And a couple of weeks have been going by, and they're thinking of some really innovative ideas together that they never had the space or time to do before. So with that, that's an idea for cross-functional. If you have any ideas, great, put it in there. If you don't, no worries. We're going to go on to level 5. So managing up. So what will you do for your manager and or senior leaders? What I've been seeing is some of my conversations, they're just asking their manager, how are you doing? I know you're asking all of your direct reports, but how are you doing through all of this? What's coming up for you? How are you feeling? And what can I do to help support you best during this time? And by just asking those questions and having that deeper level of conversation, it really builds some really nice outcomes for the manager and for the leader. Another area that I'm seeing is that increasing strategic planning and options, because if you sit down as a leader and really think through, okay, what is my team going to do? What are my customers going to do? And thinking through the options, bringing that to their managers, because their managers are going through their own whirlwind. So being able to be proactive and having those conversations and saying, hey, these are some draft ideas that I've been thinking about. What are you thinking about? Okay, we'll take some of these pieces and let's go. And so those are some of the inspirational conversations of being proactive that I'm seeing. So for level 5, managing up, please feel free to add your ideas. I'm going to move on to, I'm going to pivot to strategic business planning. And the first phase is kind of what we're in right now. And that's what our new normal is. And hopefully it won't be longer than 6 months. But what I'm seeing leaders do, and Dave Cafaro actually spoke last week on the webinar for ECofOC and did a wonderful job on giving some deeper texture on business planning. I'm not an expert in it, so I'll leave it to Dave. But really what I'm hearing from my clients is that they're looking at their vision and strategy from the past. They're revising it based on what their customers are doing. They're rolling out new department goals, working with the department heads and metrics. They're aligning people, processes, and systems. And then they're scheduling in time to assess and adjust. Great leaders, take their outlook and they say, once a week, I'm going to have thinking strategy time. And it's going to be 1 or 2 hours, but I'm going to just save that space so that I can step back and look at what's going on. So this is phase 1. Phase 2 is really about what some companies are starting to do, which is that reboarding or onboarding again to the newer normal, right? And the best case scenario is plan A. We can bring back all of our employees. Yes, we're going to have to watch the CDC guidance and make sure that we're 6 foot physical distancing and all that stuff. But what is the best case scenario? Now, also plan B, what's our contingent plan? If we don't have all of our customers back, we probably can't hire back all of our employees. What does that look like? Who are you going to keep in your team and who might unfortunately we're hearing news that this could be coming back around again. So what is that plan if this happens again in the fall or in the winter time? So those are the 3 plans that are bubbling up. And then lastly, phase 3 is, what does this mean long-term for your business? 2 to 3 years from now, what have we learned from all of this? How are we going to have to pivot and bounce and adjust what our course was? And what are we going to have to invest in today in order to increase our talent in certain areas, increase skill sets, retrain, cross-train? What processes do we have to do differently? What systems do we need to start investing in now and building out for the future so that the business can remain sustainable and flexible long-term? So I went through that pretty quickly, but I want to wrap up by just saying, leaders today are pivoting and bouncing, and hopefully through all of this, there's going to be some goodness coming out. And so what I'd like to ask you right now is, what are going to be your 2 or 3 things of goodness that you want to commit to and do moving forward as a result of this time? go ahead and put your ideas and share those commitments. Remember, if you share them, your probability is going to go up 42%. And then also if you share it with somebody else, which we got a lot of people on the call today, it's going to be remembered, and 65% is going to be your new target. Anyway, please feel free to add in your thoughts. And I have a list here from my clients that I just put up as some ideas. But again, we want to kind of get that collective group and ideas going so that we can have a copy and paste at the end of today and be able to share that with inspiration. So with that, I am going to ask you to go ahead and wait till the end of the webinar. Everybody's hopefully putting in new ideas. And what you need to do is go to the very top of your chat box and copy and paste it into a Word document or an email. If you're having challenges with that, please let me know, email me, call me. I'd be happy to send you the list afterwards. But I just wish you all well. I hope you get a nugget or two out of today's presentation, and thank you for being here. Ernest, do you want to open it up to questions, comments, or maybe even share a couple of examples that people are putting in the chat box?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for that. So I don't think in the chat box, not everyone shared their ideas with all attendees. Some shared with everybody, some shared with only the panelists. So I'm not sure that all attendees can see what's written in the chat box. Would you like me to go through those and read them?
Sure, just maybe a couple, and then maybe we could put them all together out of both of them, and I can send them out. If anybody wants to reach out to me, I'd be happy to send them out.
Okay, fantastic. Also, as we're doing this, please go ahead and open up your Q&A box and type in any questions or conversation points you'd like Tara to address. So going to what was shared on the panel, Tara, can you see what was shared in the chat box at your end?
Let me open that, but go ahead and keep chatting. Let's see. Yes, I just pulled it up.
Okay. Would you like to pick a couple of those and make them talking points, talk about them a little bit?
Sure, thank you. So I'm looking at a couple here. So I have from someone, Todd, in each one of my one-on-one meetings with my managers, I end session with the question, what can I do to support you during these challenging times? That's amazing. That's exactly what we're talking about. Let's see, who else could we share one more with? For a team, Rudolph, checking with colleagues as to how to modify strategies to meet organizational goals. So there's a couple more in here. Again, I'll copy and paste, and we can probably share them. If you would like, just email me or call me, and I'd be happy to forward them out.
Okay, in fact, I can do this right now as we're addressing some. There's a question on the panel from Lois. Lois, thank you. Lois is asking if she can get copies, or the attendees can get copies of the slides that you just shared with them. She says it's great info and it went by pretty quickly. Thanks.
Sure, that'd be fine.
So we can arrange so that everybody gets a copy of the slides. Other questions? Okay. Can we also get a copy of the recording? I think this would benefit others in my organizations. By all means, when the webinar is over, shoot me an email, and I'm not sure if Zoom distributes that directly or not. The webinar is being recorded. Shoot me an email and I'll send you a link to download the webinar. Other questions? Tara, what are some leaders you follow for inspiration?
Oh, that's a great question. Right now, I am really trying to get some learnings around David Rock. You know, Brene Brown is a great inspiration to me. There's just so many. It really depends on what the topic is. And you know, Lean In is a great book to increase just assertiveness. So just it's really depending on the topic. Great question. Thank you.
Other questions? You have a bit of a shy audience, Tara. Okay, with that, we can conclude the webinar. Before you go, a couple of announcements. For next week, we were not going to have a webinar like this one. Oh, wait, we have another comment on the panel. This is from Martha. Tara, are you surprised by the 75% rating for the acceptance? That was the last piece.
You know, we all have our opinion on where people are. And I bet if you ask another group of individuals that aren't coaches or clients, it might be a different reality. And I think we all go through different parts of that every day. I don't know about you, but I find myself in denial like a couple minutes of the day and anger. So, you know, I think everybody's coming to grips with what we're going through today. And I think a lot of people are hopeful and seeing some of the goodness that's coming out of this. But that's my thoughts on it. Everybody has their own perception.
Thank you, Tara. We have a request in the chat box. Can you put up the slide with the 5 points again, please?
Sure. This slide or the 5 levels?
The 5 points, the 5 levels, yes.
Okay. There you go.
Was there a question following that? Any other questions before we conclude? Okay. Do you have any specific ideas for nonprofits?
Well, today we kind of talked about leadership, and that's kind of crosses all industries and groups. I wouldn't say that there's anything different as we show up and how we lead. So if I had a little bit more information, I would be able to answer that better for you.
Yes, it's Harish. Could you please elaborate on your question a little bit? We would love to work with you on that question. Okay, let me go through the announcements for next week. Well, there it is. I think we don't have quite the organization that many have because we are all volunteers. So I take it that there's no staff. And I take it you're looking for any specific ideas given the current situation. Tara?
You know, just being a volunteer in itself is a great leadership step. And just being a part of an organization is a great opportunity to show your own leadership. So hopefully that those folks that are doing that, they can show their own inspiration in the way that they show up as a volunteer.
Thank you. So there's one more question. Within the framework, I think I'm missing the beginning of this one, but within the framework, any element that would, oh, okay, so got it. So within the framework that you shared with them, Tara, is there any element that would take a greater priority than the others?
I think the first level, this is my own personal opinion, is that, you know, starting with yourself. Again, if you're not centered and you're not focused and you're not taking time to breathe and take care of yourself, none of the other levels work. And so it's really just trying to make sure that you're taking care of yourself during this time. So I think that's probably the most important level.
Thank you. Other questions? Okay, well, with that concludes the webinar. Before you take off, there are a couple of announcements. The first one is next week, we're not going to have a webinar like this one, but the Ganeshi Center, in partnership with the Executive Coaches of Orange County, the Small Business Development Center, OC Grant Makers, and Farmers and Merchant Bank, will present an update on COVID funding's next phase. And to represent ECofOC, we have Steve Smith. He's with the Executive Coaches of Orange County. He's also a professional coach. Will be representing ECofOC. So please keep an eye for the announcement that we'll be sending shortly. And before you sign off, we would greatly appreciate it if you took 1 minute to respond to our very short survey to help us improve our service to you. And well, we have one more question. Will you take one more question, Tara?
Sure.
Okay. So the question is, or comment rather, many of the activities I normally count on to recharge and re-energize myself over the weekend are no longer available. Seeing movies, beach, outdoor recreation, and so on. What are some of the attendees doing to replace these activities? I'm tired of streaming and overeating. How are you, Tara?
Well, wow, that's a personal answer. But, you know, just maybe have a brainstorming with the people in your own home and say, okay, what can we do? And actually, I did that with my family. It's, you know, how are we going to treat each other? What do we want to do for fun? What are some projects around the house that we need to do that we never probably have gotten to? I don't know if you call that fun, but there's a way to just brainstorm and try to get creative and innovative so that you feel productive. And for high achievers out there, they really need something to do. And getting out and getting fresh air and buying a bike or buying exercise, you know, equipment might be different if you don't have that, but it might be something long-term that you really enjoy. So it might be a gift later on.
Thank you, Tara. As you were speaking, there was a lot of acknowledgement and love pouring into both panels, the questions and answers and chat. So I'm going to leave you with what people wrote about you. So first, Harish, thank you. Your mindfulness of self, that was your response to the earlier question, is very key. Randy, thank you all very much. Lois, excellent. Lots of great info, thank you. Christine, thank you, Tara, and ECofOC, great presentation and on inspirational leadership that we all need now. Yes, indeed. There's also Rudolph is sharing something with us. For me, in my family, we have become more supportive of each other by praying together, cooking together, sharing our feelings. Thank you, Tara. Thank you, Ernest. Thank you all. I appreciate your participation. The webinar is complete, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.